Have a watch of this one. Dr. McDougall throwing Gregor's arsenic, rice, bunk, whatever, into the rice cooker. Dr. McDougall's throwing McGregor into the rice cooker. Check this out.
Many people eat rice.
My God.
Obviously, I shouldn't be eating rice because it's loaded with arsenic. And everybody knows this because Consumers Report did a big article in November in 2012 and told you that your rice is loaded with arsenic. What the Consumer Report says is it says this. It says rice contributes to 70% of exposure to inorganic arsenic. But they go on to say, which would put it in third place behind fruits, fruit juices at 18% and vegetables at 24%. Still, all you've heard is don't eat rice. And that's all your friends have told you. Don't eat rice because it's loaded with arsenic. And you say, okay, McDougall, weigh in. Now, if you read this Nature article, what they say is they say this. They say, the situation is especially dire in Bangladesh, where rice is the national staple. And the water is naturally high in arsenic. But that's not what the report tried to tell you. They tried to tell you that rice is a huge threat to your health. Excuse me, the problem is the water in Bangladesh. It's loaded with arsenic. They'll tell you, okay, there are some wise things that you can do as a consumer. And one of the things you want to do is you want to buy California-produced rice. Now you say, what's so special about California-produced rice? What's special about California-produced rice as opposed to rice grown in the southeast United States is that rice grown in California is not grown on soils that are highly polluted with arsenic. Whereas in the southeast United States, they used to grow cotton. It was the major crop. And the boll weevil was a primary threat to the cotton crops. And guess what they did to kill the boll weevils? They sprayed them with arsenic. And what do you think happened to that arsenic? It went into the soil. And so now when they grow rice in the southeast United States, guess what it's loaded with? There's nothing wrong with rice. What's wrong is our soils are contaminated with lead and arsenic and cadmium and all kinds of garbage. Why pick on rice? Now, the other recommendation they have is don't eat brown rice. Excuse me, I spent the last 40 years being told that I need to eat whole grains. And now they're saying the arsenic is primarily concentrated in the bran, so one way to solve the problem, in addition to buying California rice, is eat white rice. And you're thinking, wait a minute, this flies in the face of everything I have ever learned, but it's Consumer Reports and Nature magazine. Who's to argue with the experts? And you don't know what to do, okay? One of the things they forgot to mention is 90% of the intake of arsenic in the consuming population of the US and Europe comes from seafood. Yes, it does, but somehow that didn't hit their radar screen. And what they say is, that's not important because this is organic arsenic. Excuse me, organic arsenic is toxic too. And you say, okay, now what they're telling me is don't eat rice, and I think probably rice, I like rice. And they didn't mention seafood. Okay, so let's see. What am I going to do? Well, let's see what's happened to rice consumption worldwide. If I say rice, you say China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan, India. That's what you say when I say rice. You say, let's see, I've been around for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and what I remember in all my studies and all my travels is that people in the Far East They eat mostly rice, and there are no fat people, and they don't have breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and they're hardworking all day long. And those Far East Asians, they almost won World War II, and they did beat us in the Vietnam conflict. Let's see. Am I missing something? Well, that was the Asian before 1980. What has happened in China, Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, is they have become rich. Excuse me, they have almost as many Tesla supercharging stations in China as they do in the US. They have become rich in China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Japan, etc., even India. And what have they done with this wealth? Well, they've changed what they eat. Yes, they have. And so they've stopped eating so much rice. If you look at the worldwide consumption of rice, it is down all over the Far East. Yes, it is. But what's up? These are just the facts, ladies and gentlemen. What's up is the consumption of animal foods, meat and dairy, all over the world. I was in India 6 months ago. I told the 3 hospitals that I talked to that China was the fattest, sickest nation in the world. And the Indian people stood up and said, "You're wrong, we are. We're the fattest, sickest people in the world. Yes, we are." That's what they told me. How could I argue? The consumption of meat and dairy has almost doubled in the last 30 years. Yes, it has. And so has the consumption of vegetable oil. So they eat less rice, more meat, more dairy, more oil. In India, Japan, China, Vietnam, every other place that you can look, want to travel, or watch a TV documentary on, they eat less rice and more meat and more dairy. And they drive more Teslas. Okay? And before 1980, I've been around a long time. I'm almost 68 years old. I'm a grandfather. I have 6 grandkids, 1 on the way. I've been at this for 46 years. And some of you have been around long enough to make the same observations that I have. Prior to 1980, there were no fat people in Vietnam, Cambodia, China, or Japan. No, there weren't. You could stand in a town square with 100,000 fellow citizens and you wouldn't see a single fat person. But back before 1980, 90% of their food came from rice. There was virtually no type 2 diabetes. There was no multiple sclerosis. Post-World War II Japan, they described 76 cases of prostate cancer. Before 1980, when 90% of their diet was rice, sure, they had sanitation problems. They had problems of getting enough food. They had immunization problems. But before 1980, they had no bypass surgeons. Oncology was a bad business to be in. Since 1980, what's happened is people in the Far East have become wealthy. And what have they done with that wealth? As people would naturally do. They have improved their diet, so to speak. And what has happened since 1980, when fewer than 1% of the population had type 2 diabetes, and there was virtually no obesity in the Far East, what has happened is they have enthusiastically taken on the rich Western diet. And the consequences are, today in China, half the people are pre-diabetic. At least that's what the Journal of the Medical Association says. 12% of the population in China has type 2 diabetes. No, maybe it's more in India. Who's here to argue? Rice is not the problem. Certainly you don't want to eat dirty food. You don't want your crops growing in soils contaminated with lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium, etc. You want clean food. But there's no reason to take and declare this all-out war on rice. It's not the problem.
Dr. McDougall. How do I get myself out of this rice cooker? Ah.